Morning, everyone. Is this working? Great to be here at the Conduit, and thanks to Paul and the whole Conduit team for arranging this really topical day of discussion. I think that's quite a challenge that we've had there from Lord Adair Turner. I think it's probably thrown off some of our slides and talking points. We can probably throw them away at this point. But I think it's, as a way of starting off the discussion, I think it's really gone to some of the points that we come across all the time. So I'm Ben Backwell. I'm the CEO of the Global Wind Energy Council. We represent the wind industry all around the world, both the corporates and companies and investors, but also associations all around the world, from South Africa to Brazil to Japan and China. And organise many activities around job creation, skills, training, and many activities like that. But also spend a lot of time lobbying government and talking to governments around the world. And the first thing we get wherever we go is, how many jobs are you going to create? How many factories are you going to build? And we very much come up against this conundrum that Lord Adair talked about, which is that we're a very high-tech industry, very technologically sophisticated, and in a stage where we're still introducing new technology, and yet the pressure is around creating new local jobs, new local facilities, and in a world also where there's a high degree of concentration around manufacturing in terms of different components. So it's a really pertinent discussion for you. I'm going to introduce our two panelists, who both, I think, can bring some insight into this in different ways. So first of all, Dr. Afshin Rashid, who is the CEO and founder of Repower in London, but she's also worked for a long time on social justice issues around energy around London, has done some, has worked from the ground up, really trying to involve communities in energy generation. So I'll be really interested to hear her perspective. Afshin, please come up. And then really on a kind of different end of the kind of local global scale, Jonathan Cole is the CEO of Choreo Generation, which is a global developer and builder of offshore wind projects. And we're talking about big, large-scale projects, again, from Australia to Japan to North America to our own shores in the UK. So Jonathan's former head of offshore wind for Iberdrola, global utility, and has also sat on many industry government committees and commissions where he's been in these conversations around job creation, skills, how do you replace oil and gas jobs or whatever. So Jonathan, please come up. Okay, so I'm not sure how we're doing. We're well over time, I believe. I'm not sure, Paul, or how long we've got. Great, I can see in front of me. This is my first test with tech is that the time is ticking away in front of me. So we've got 43 minutes and 25 seconds. We're going to talk to our panel and take advantage of their insights, and then we're going to hopefully have time for plenty of questions as well and some discussion. But what I'm going to start with is I'd like both the panelists, first of all, just to give some reflections around what Lord Adair was talking about. I mean, first of all, are we over-promising? How important are we in this whole picture of the transition, and how important are jobs within it, or is it just other things that are more important? So I'll go to you first.
Yeah, thank you. As you said, maybe all the kind of ideas or concepts I had have kind of been shaken a little bit. It's like, I strongly believe that there's an opportunity to create jobs, particularly for those who live in disadvantaged communities and communities who are marginalized, not benefiting from the economic growth that we experience. Because working in communities across London, people are not engaged in green energy, not engaged in the energy transition, don't care. But they are doing everything that they can in their homes in terms of reducing their energy costs and their energy bills. And they are most aware of all the measures that they can do. They want to participate, but don't have a means to participate, and do not see the benefits coming directly to them. But what's the beauty, and I'd like to kind of share here, is about what repowering does. And I'm not sure many people know about community energy, but it is a people-led solution to the energy transition. It's about putting power in the hands of people. And what repowering does, and our vision, is to create a clean, local and affordable energy future for all. And we do that by working with local people to help them take the power, claim the power that they have, to plan, fund and build their low carbon futures. But the important thing is for the benefits to stay local. And we have an industry, fossil fuel based one, that is very extractive, and local economic benefits just go away, not just from the local area, but regionally, nationally as well. And we're very mindful of that in the work that I do, is how do local people benefit? And jobs is a key part of that benefit. When we develop projects, we're working with young people who wouldn't otherwise have got involved in the projects of installing solar panels on local community buildings. But because we have such a grassroots approach to engaging with young people in those communities, working with youth clubs, working with other grassroots organizations, we are identifying and supporting them to get employment, get work experience, get exposure in terms of what these green jobs are, because that's not the language that they're speaking. They need to feed their families, they need money and they need to a roof under their heads, and those are basic needs. And that's where the value is in terms of grassroots and community-based organizations, in terms of taking the message to communities. Because I think what we really need to remember, this is a just transition, and what does that actually mean? And leaving no one behind. And we will leave people behind if we don't include people in the solutions, if we don't involve them, if they don't see the benefits of the energy transition. They will be those GLA moments. They will be those moments of protest. But if people are designing their own solutions, if they are the decision makers, if they are empowered, they can see the pros and cons. They are innovative. They find solutions that will be more suited to that local context. So I think it's really important for us to think about the local context, local solutions, not a one-size-fits-all, a tailored approach. So we have to be very adaptive in our energy transition and the solutions. We need to be flexible, we need to be dynamic, we need to give power to people. And are all jobs going to be green jobs? No, but I think we need to also think about the fact that not all green jobs are just nuts and bolts in the engineering and the technical side of things. A lot of my team are employed, are not doing the engineering. We're doing a lot of the marketing, we're doing the engagement, copywriting of text and language to talk to people, to engage with them. We're running programs, community engagement, co-design, participatory approaches, policy making, communications marketing, fundraising. These are not all about tech. And I think we need to be very careful when we talk about green jobs, that we're thinking about green jobs in a broader sense, and not just the nuts and bolts in the engineering side of it. There is a lot happening around these engineering jobs that create the market, that create the demand, that can create the customer journey, the customer satisfaction. So I just want to just put that into context here. It's broader than just nuts and bolts. And maybe I'll hand over to Jonathan to share some of his reflections as I kind of think through that as well.
Thank you very much. It was a fascinating speech from Lord Turner. I think my first reflection was he obviously lives in a nicer part of town than me, because if he can leave his laptop in a line bike for half an hour and it's still there, that's pretty impressive. Second thing I was struck by was his confidence in our ability to deliver the energy transition and his belief in the technology. And as someone who has given my entire professional career to this movement, it's nice to hear that, because we do hear a lot the opposite side of it. So that was very encouraging. I thought the Karl Marx quote was an interesting one. Now, I run a company now which is owned by an investment bank, so I can't really admit too openly to being a bit of a Marxist, right? But I do resonate a lot with what he says. But one thing I think's missing from that bit at the end about, the only way the cost of the energy transition is lower is if the basically profitability is lower or labour costs are lower, I think ignores one thing, which is the enormous cost to the economy of not undertaking the energy transition, and the cost we imply into our society if we allow this environmental catastrophe to carry on happening. But that was the only thing I'd be indignant or kind of cheeky enough to contradict. The thing that really strikes me, though, is what he's saying is that this is actually all about the wider economic context. And what we shouldn't do when we work in the power sector, renewable energy, is take upon ourselves that we have to solve every aspect of this. What we need to do is go as fast and as hard as we can into delivering the energy transition. We need to create as many jobs as we can along the way. But fundamentally, the success of this movement will depend on what's going on in the wider economy. And the anecdote about what happened in the coal industry over the 1980s is a great example of that. So I have to admit, I don't think it threw me off in terms of my fundamental beliefs. Some of my stats need to be revisited, but hopefully you won't all have been paying so much attention to his speech and mine that you'll notice the discrepancy. But otherwise, I totally agree with everything he said and feel really energised having listened to that speech.
Thanks, Jonathan. And actually, important point you made around the kind of jobs as well. We tend to think of it as engineering, but it's also financial engineering. It's project management. It's HR. It's marketing. It's many things. It's public affairs. It's public engagement, and so on and so on. Your projects essentially are mainly installing solar PV in communities. Can you talk us through a little bit what that implies in terms of the kind of jobs? Are people ready for them in terms of skills, and what do you do to bridge that skills gap? And also, just another question is, when obviously once the project's actually built, what do people do then? Are they able to then move on to other projects? How does that work?
Yeah. So as an organization, we're a development body. So we don't install the kit ourselves, and we get contractors to do the installations. But what we do is help people in the community benefit from any work experience they can while doing the installations. We work with young people on training programs to help them get involved in every aspect of the development of the project. So what's quite interesting is that people get quite attracted by solar panels. They're a great engagement tool in terms of talking about energy. The less sexier side is the retrofit side and energy efficiency side of things. And people get hooked on, oh wow, solar panels. They can see something tangible happen in their community. They get involved, but what we've seen with young people is they have this notion, but I'm not technical and I don't want to do this. But what we give them the experience of is that there are other aspects that you can get involved in, and that is around marketing, fundraising, outreach, engagement, and all of those are key aspects. So there is willingness. There is a group of people who do want to get into technical roles and jobs, but there are also people who aren't so inclined, but also need to know that there are green jobs in a softer sense as well, in a broader sense, and they do get involved. And I was fortunate yesterday to meet with one of our trainees from 10 years ago who got a work experience on one of our installations back in 2012. And he's come back and we're having a discussion with him of being involved as a project manager in one of our projects, which is not around just solar, it's also about retrofit. So community energy organizations like ours are looking at energy in a more integrated system and a holistic approach to a household experience. So it's about energy generation, supply, retrofit, energy advice, tackling fuel poverty, making it affordable, and we can do that. And I think Lord Turner's point about the opportunity around energy efficiency and retrofit is a big one. We've seen quite a lot of interest in that, but there's more investment needed to help people go from level 2 qualifications to becoming a retrofit assessor or a coordinator or a program manager. So I think there is more investment needed in supporting people on a kind of pathway where more technical skills are required. But there's definite interest, and we need to support people more on the journey to get these jobs and get employed. Because as the demand increases, not as many people have the skills to do the heat pumps, install the heat pumps, and do the retrofit. So it's a big thing within the space that we're working in.
Thank you, and I'll come back to you maybe a bit later around solar and how that works a little bit, because I think there's some interesting points that Adair has raised. Jonathan, could you talk us a little bit through offshore wind and the kind of jobs that we create, and also the scale of it? I mean, even though Lord Adair was kind of downplaying the amount of jobs we're creating, I mean, we're a couple of million people in the wind industry already. We'll be a couple of million more over the next 5 or 6 years. Talk us through a little bit what the jobs are in offshore wind, but also what the impact is on communities and coastal communities as well a little bit.
Sure. So I think there's no question that offshore wind today is already a success story. It's a UK industrial and economic success story. I think, am I looking out over the audience, and I see some people who have been involved in the sector who probably heard me talk about this before, but offshore wind is not something that we will do in the future and produce benefit in the future. Already today in the UK, there's more than 30,000 people employed in offshore wind. RUK expect that number to go north of 100,000 by the end of the decade. That's direct jobs, so that's comparable to Lord Turner's direct and first line indirect. And that's jobs, not just out on the continental shelf, but jobs, elsewhere in the economy. So this is a really important creator of a relevant number of jobs, and it's quite compatible with the number of jobs that might be coming out of an analogous sector like oil and gas. Now, when you break those jobs down, it more or less works out about half of those jobs are involved in the manufacturing of kit and the preparation of kit to be installed. About a quarter of those jobs are involved in the actual installation of the kit and the construction of the projects. And then about a quarter of those jobs are involved in services like O&M services, but also professional services, management, and all the rest of it. So you've got a good distribution of low-skilled, high-skilled, and professional jobs. You've got a good distribution of city-type jobs, as well as jobs which are occurring in post-industrial towns and coastal communities around the country. And that's one of the most profound things that has happened with offshore wind. If you look at where a lot of these jobs are being created, particularly the semi-skilled jobs, they're being created in coastal communities that for 20, 30 years had been outside of the economic mainstream. So you've got places like Hull taking in more than 1,000 jobs for a factory to make blades with Siemens. You've got Hartlepool with a factory making cables for JDR. You've got businesses building crew transfer vessels, making other bits of steel all up and down the country, breathing life back into these towns and communities. And even if in each individual example it's 1,000 or so jobs, which in the when we talk about this transition we talk in bigger magnitudes, in those towns and communities that's transformational. Because what that's doing is it's creating well-paid, long-term jobs that allow people to stay in the communities in which they were raised. And it's creating hope and opportunity for young people in those communities. And that's already happening. That's something I'm immensely proud of about what's happened with offshore wind, is we're delivering that already. You go to these places and you see it, and the prospects for further growth and further delivery just, keep going.
Yeah, I think it's an important point. And I think this point around solar, it is important to realise that for wind and offshore wind in particular, a lot of the manufacturing will be done locally, or at least a significant part, because of the size of the components. So, you need basically building very big things on the quayside to do offshore wind, right? So you will see that. Whereas with solar, I mean, we're essentially talking about installation, and the factories are extremely concentrated. These enormous factories, essentially in China and one or two other places, with some other places now trying to scale
Is there a
up.
case to be made to have more manufacturing done in Europe, in the UK?
I go Jonathan on this one. So, what do you think?
So there's absolutely a case to be made, and again, if we go back to what Lord Turner said, which is you want to go as hard and as fast as you can into deploying these projects, and you want to create, you know, the as much jobs as you can. But that doesn't mean creating every job, because there are aspects of the supply chain in offshore wind that rely on a low-wage economy, so highly manualised activity where you are going up against maybe, you know, fabrication activity that takes place in the Middle East or in Southeast Asia at a much lower labour cost. And that's not the economy we have, it's not the economy we want, right? So what you need to do is say, yeah, I want all the jobs I can get, but I want the jobs that suit my economy and my skill set. So, I mean, honestly, I think what it doesn't mean is looking back and trying to prop up or protect or create jobs of the past. It means looking forward. So in this country, the jobs we should be looking at are the jobs that are you know, helpful for the proximity argument, so massive bits of kit that you don't want to transport over long distances, so it makes sense to do it locally, or jobs which lend themselves to advanced manufacturing and AI and robotics and that, you know, things that are more within our economic skill set, and those happen to be, you know, probably better paid, more skilled jobs anyway. So I think that when we have this conversation about manufacturing, probably what we can't expect is that at the subcomponent level, we're going to compete with you know, factories in other parts of the world that are low-wage economies. But what we can expect is that the higher, more advanced manufacturing and the finishing big products, we can certainly expect to be creating those jobs. And that I think is also getting the right balance for consumers. Because if you try to create too many of those other jobs locally, you end up pushing the cost up, and then that has other wider economic impacts. And then you have to also counterbalance that against a resilience point, which is, yeah, it's fair to say we don't want everything coming from one part of the world. We want resilient supply chains, which means a bit of diversification. It doesn't mean we need to internalise everything in our own country or our own trading bloc, because I think that's too protectionist and will end up slowing down the transition. And will end up making it much more expensive.
Yeah, I agree, Jonathan. Those are very good points. I think there is something around the ethics as well, though, in terms of procurement and supply chains, and just challenging that a little bit. I know we want to reduce costs, we want to move at pace, but what we get pushback sometimes within the community is also about the impact on some of the extractions of minerals, or the, you know, people who are employed should be employed with in good terms. So there's this level of ethics and values incorporated within that. But within our projects, you were asking, Ben, you know, the team are involved in asset management, and you know, it is fairly standardized kit. You know, solar kind of runs itself, isn't it? But there are maintenance, and there's ways to keep people involved and engaged, and there's some kind of a lot of team get involved in, from our point of view, in community energy projects, is about once a project is established, they get involved in how we use the income, how the income is generated, and how it's distributed. So yeah, you maintain the asset, and that's the standardized process, but people want to see how the local community is benefiting, and where's this money going, and distributing it locally, and supporting more education training programs, or supporting those who are fuel poor. And those are the kind of decisions that they come around and gather around. So there are other opportunities to keep people engaged on the project, as well as employed in the community.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, some of the things we're talking about in a way seem like luxury problems. Obviously, they're not on a planetary scale, and they're not in terms of, you know, how important it is to stop climate change, of course. But I mean, we're essentially talking about first world problems, or at least a lot of the way that Lord Adair framed it was around OECD countries. What are we doing to make sure that the global south is benefiting from the green revolution? And what are the problems that those global south countries face when we're trying to install large-scale renewable energy projects there? And how does that differ from the projects we're seeing in the global north? Because I know, Jonathan, you're in quite a lot of new markets as well, some of them very significant, you know, from places in Southeast Asia to Brazil, for instance. What are the challenges there compared to the OECD countries?
Sure. Well, so first thing is actually to, before we get the challenges, just say that the opportunity to a lot of these global south economies is to rapidly accelerate the electrification of their economy, which has an enormous amount of corresponding positive benefits in terms of creating, you know, moving from an economy which relies upon, you know, people doing things manually to a more automated economy, creating a middle class, etc. You know, so electrification is often the first step to that, and renewable energy offers a chance to get that electrification journey done quickly. But I mean, the two biggest issues faced by emerging markets and developing economies are around financing and supply chain, right? And I think, again, Lord Turner touched on this. Maybe there's a few things today that Lord Turner won't have touched on, but he touched on this. You know, so what we see, for example, if you're in Africa or parts of Asia, the cost of capital for an infrastructure project could be 14 or 15%, right? Compared to a cost of capital here, which, you know, was for a long time sub 5%, and it's went up by 2 or 3%, and it's suddenly pushed the cost of delivery up by 30%, right? So you imagine trying to deliver what we're delivering here at a cost of capital of, you know, 14%. That's making it impossible. It's making it unaffordable. It's just fatuous to talk about an energy transition with those financial terms, and that's why a lot of the effort that, you know, you and I are involved in at the UN level and, you know, and COP and things like that, is talking about mobilising lower cost finance on better terms, getting multilaterals and concessional finance into those economies to try and help do this in a more affordable way. And then the second issue is supply chain, and that's because right now we're in a moment where the opportunity for renewable deployment is through the roof, but because of other issues around, you know, the COVID hangover, inflation, cost of capital increases, the supply chain is actually quite fragile. And so getting deployment and investment in supply chain into some of these developing markets is quite tough. And again, some interventions probably needed at a you know, kind of multinational level to try and help that happen. So yeah, but it's an opportunity rather than a threat to those economies, I believe, but it needs intervention and help from the global north, from the developed economies, to help get it up and running at reasonable financial terms.
Yeah, and again, I mean, it's about the broader and wider kind of economic development and also the human development, I think. But I think as people have said, yeah, we're not going to solve all the problems of massive informal economies that, you know, we see in places like Brazil and in Africa and other places. Yeah, go on, please.
I just, sorry, I don't want to cut your flow of thought, but I do want to bring the conversation back to UK and London as well, because 7 million people in a developed country are living in fuel poverty, and the energy system isn't working for many of those lower income households who are not even captured within that 7 million figure. We've not got the solution ourselves, you know, in terms of the way we operate and generate and distribute our energy. We need to fundamentally also think about what we can do differently here in terms of ensuring that people can have access to affordable energy, those people who don't own their homes and don't have, you know, disposable income to invest in the technology, can still benefit from this green revolution that's going to happen, be it, you know, solar panels, wind, or the retrofit or heat pumps in their homes. They need to be all, if we don't want to leave anyone behind, the just transition needs to ensure that everyone can participate and benefit. And to do that, we need to ensure there's local solutions and that people are given the power to create some of those solutions and see the benefits coming back into their homes. So I think there's quite a lot of like challenges in the UK itself as well. We haven't quite cracked that nut ourselves in terms of how we are going to make this transition a just one and ensure that no one is left behind. And community energy is one of the solutions to that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I guess the question is, you know, how involved do you want people to be in, you know, their energy supply? And I mean, your take on things is that, you know, you need this kind of public support. And maybe let's segue into this before we bring in questions. I mean, are we winning the battle in terms of convincing people? I mean, we've seen the kind of attempts at a backlash. We've seen strong backlashes in some countries around some aspects, although not really around electricity generation. But certainly, you know, this kind of idea that things are going to get more expensive and so on. You know, how well do you think we're doing in terms of winning the battle in terms of public opinion?
Well, exactly. Our approaches are very much top-down, done to people. A lot of the delivery models, even within local authorities, is we've got money from a national government, we're going to put in and install, you know, do the retrofit and impose these measures on people who aren't prepared, who haven't been engaged, who didn't give consent. And I think consent is really important. Citizen participation and consent will unlock the doors. Committee on Climate Change has said, you know, 60% of the changes that we need to get to net zero is based on behavior change. If we're not going to bring people with us, we're not going to get there. So I think we need to get better in terms of including people, engaging, and not just consultation as a tick box exercise. This is true participation and involvement of people. So there is you know, when we talk about reducing costs, there's probably costs that we're not capturing somewhere that we need to invest our time in, and that is about engagement. It's about bringing people on board so that we can get the change that we want to. And I fear that in some of the numbers that we're speaking about, while we're driving down costs, we're not factoring that cost in.
Jonathan, what are we doing to win hearts and minds over this?
Yeah, I mean, so again, this is a topic that we have been wrestling with for our entire professional lives. It's a battle we're not really winning, and again, Lord Turner said it, but we're very good at talking to ourselves and convincing ourselves how righteous we are, not so good out in the rest of the world. And I think part of the reason for that is because the message that we're giving isn't, from a communications point of view, a particularly easy one. So the benefits that we're selling, which is a clean energy transition, which is investment in infrastructure, which is energy security, long-term energy price stability, yada yada. People in our country take that as an automatic, take that for granted. They just think that's going to happen anyway and somebody's going to deliver that for them. So they don't place enough personal value on those things, right? Second thing is, the risks that we are trying to abate, which are risks around climate and environmental issues. Again, a lot of people still think that that's a matter that's going to happen at some point off in the future at some other part of the world, and they find it very easy to be ignored or distracted from the fact that flooding and extreme weather events and mass migration of people and all these other things that are happening today because of climate change are affecting us today, and everyone in this room will have somehow been affected by those, but somehow the risks aren't appreciated or seen. And then the other side of it is that, you know, what we're actually trying to deliver is off in the future, and getting there is disruptive. Somehow it's disruptive to your life. I've got to change my gas boiler to an electric one. I've got to change my diesel car to a battery one. These are disruptions that if I don't understand or care about the benefit, and I don't understand or care about the risks, why do I want to put myself through the disruption? So fundamentally, we're on the back foot straight away. And the other side of this argument, and I'm not saying that there's some right-wing cabal controlling the media, but there is definitely a coordinated effort to put the other sides of this argument up there. They find it very easy then to exploit those things. I think what we need to then be able to do somehow is make the more emotional connection with people by showing people that what's in it for them is real, it's tangible, it's near term, it's being done with them and for them, not to them, and actually try and win an argument on emotional grounds. Because what we've been doing all the time, by the way, is the argument starts off on emotional grounds against us, and then we try and combat that with logic. And you can't win an emotional argument with logic. That's taking a knife to a gunfight. We need to try and win the emotional bit by getting people more engaged.
Collaborate more.
Yeah.
Collaborate more.
I want to open up to questions because we've only got a few minutes left, and I want to give people in the audience a chance. So I'll go to the gentleman there. First of all, you had your hand up with the blue shirt. Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about the actual skills that are required for the renewable industry? How long does it take to reskill someone that is potentially now working in the oil and gas industry to help and install a wind farm? And sorry, I'm not an engineer, but just I hope you understand what I'm meaning. How long does it take? Are we talking month or years, and is the current education system actually prepared to help in this transition?
Let's collect a couple of questions. So let's take a note of that one for Jonathan. Yes, the gentleman over here.
So you're saying we need to do a better job of creating an emotional connection with people in order to sell the advantages of this transition. When you say we, who's doing that? What actual roles within organizations are trying to build that connection, and who's doing the communications job to make that happen?
Yeah. Let's go on to that one first on the oil and gas to wind skills. How long does it take to train someone?
Well, actually, it's a very nuanced answer, right? But the quick answer is it's a very short period of time, because most of the inherent skills, you know, the long created trade skills are the same type of trade skills. You know, it's mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, civil engineering. These are immediately transferable, right? There's a little bit of reskilling in terms of if you want to be a technician on a wind turbine, you've got to go through a couple of years worth of training through the levels to get there. There are other things where if you want to be working offshore, there's some, certificates and permits to work you need to do. But these things can either be done in the office immediately, in getting the certificates to go out offshore in a matter of weeks, and then becoming a skilled, level 6 technician a couple of years. So, actually it's a very quick process. It's more about motivation and signalling. Sorry, this one thing, a matter of a lot of controversy has been this issue about no more licenses for oil and gas, right? And we can debate whether that's a good or bad thing overall. But the one thing that it does do that we've never had is a very clear signal that the oil and gas industry will eventually come to an end, and therefore take seriously the transition and start participating in it. Because until then, there's been too much temptation to just wait and not participate, or dip in and dip out. And what we really need is that clear signal, so those transfers can happen in a really straightforward way.
And Afshin, who's creating the emotional connection? Who's winning hearts and minds? What are those jobs?
Good point. That was saying we need to collaborate more, and there's a very much kind of them and us, and that's the kind of working with community-based organizations, social enterprises, businesses like ours that are already engaged with the communities, have better links in the communities, have trust. We employ people from the local community, and they speak in that language. They have they bring diversity of thought and emotional connection for people. And we do co-design and participatory approaches to bring more. Not everyone will want to be supplying energy, or not everyone will want, but it's having a representative sample of people who would join this movement and understand what those solutions could look like. And I think collaboration is needed, not just with public sector bodies and community organizations, but also developers, installers, we need to join the dots collectively and take ownership of this agenda to create the jobs across as well as connect with people at multiple levels.
Okay, great. Just one more question, very quick one, and that will be the last one, please. Gentleman there.
Thanks very much. I was wondering if the panel could talk about the potential for other forms of income generation rather than direct employment, because obviously renewables is a very distributed form of energy generation, and so the potential for kind of regional energy economies is huge, and yet currently I think only 1% of renewables has any form of community ownership or benefit. And so, if we want to bring people with us and we don't want to leave people behind, there are other ways of doing it rather than through direct employment.
Yeah,
That's right.
That's a good point. And what's your point?
I haven't gone into the details, but there's what community energy does in terms of the way we raise finances. People invest and join a cooperative, so you get income directly in your pockets through return on investment just from the generation and sale of electricity. People who join our projects, gain jobs directly as well as indirectly, gain skills, opportunities that they can join leadership positions in their companies as well as, in their local community. We're very mindful that at the moment, as we generate solar, we can't supply electricity directly to residents because we are generators and we don't hold supply licenses. We're trying to resolve that issue, and there will be more coming down that line. But to close that gap, we've made sure that we have surplus income from our projects that stay local and are distributed to help those who, either can't pay their energy bills, help support on advice, top up on their prepayment meters, and other forms in which they can benefit immediately from the projects. Even if they can't invest in a project, they can see direct benefits and money in their hands as a result of these projects. So there's multiple local economic benefits from a local-led approach. I hope that kind of covers your question.
Yeah, I mean, this is something for a whole discussion, I think, for another day. I mean, certainly there's different types of community benefits, some directly, but also some kind of on a more centralized level as well. And sometimes those benefits are the point of contention, which, is all the politics around building large-scale infrastructure projects. I mean, we're trying to build projects in Colombia, for instance, and you're dealing with hundreds of local communities who all want part of the project revenue, but you're also dealing with large-scale transmission infrastructure, which is something that, again, it's not just the communities producing with their solar panel, it's everything that needs to be around it in terms of the grid, the distribution, the balancing, and so on. And then into large-scale infrastructure running through places where people are living, and they also want a part of of that and want some benefit from it. So it's a really complex question. Look, I need to end it here. I'm getting overtime messages on the screen. It's been a really good, short but really interesting discussion, and this is the beginning of the day. We've still got a lot more to come in the following session, so encourage all of you to keep engaging and contributing to the next one. I want to thank our panelists, Dr. Ashin and Jonathan, for their participation. Thank you, guys.